One thing that I find very interesting is the black ops stuff that governments do to protect their power from what they see as a threat. These stories can often be very scary when you see the great lengths that governments will go to and the extremely morally bankrupt things that they will do to get rid of someone that they don't like. But sometimes when governments fail at something like this over and over, these stories can instead be extremely entertaining. And what makes it even more entertaining is some of the Looney Tunes schemes that governments will pull to kill their target, and these schemes still failing. Like when the CIA was trying to kill Fidel Castro. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. But before we get started, this video was brought to you by Displate. With millions of officially licensed designs to choose from, Displate has a high quality metal print for everyone. All of your favourite franchises are covered, including several of my personal favourites: Alien, Dark Souls, and Cowboy Bebop. You know, the good one. With Displate, starting a collection of the things that you're a fan of is extremely easy. And mounting your display is even easier. All you have to do is stick the magnet to the wall and slap that bad boy on there. And if you need some inspiration to get started, you can check out some of my other favourite displays by clicking my link down in the description. If you click my link, you won't only be supporting my channel, but you can also get 23% off of 1 or 2 displays and 29% off of 3 or more displays. This offer is only available for a limited time, so make sure you get in there fast. It's a brilliant idea for a Christmas present. Spread the joy, spread the love. Happy holidays. Click the link. Now, this is not a mad lad on Fidel Castro, but we do need to go into his life story so that you can understand how he got into a position where he ended up in the crosshairs of the CIA. So, Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz was born in Biran in the Republic of Cuba on the 13th of August 1926, and he was one of 7 children. Fidel attended Roman Catholic boarding schools in Santiago de Cuba and then the Catholic high school Belen in Havana, where he proved to be quite an accomplished athlete. He was named Havana's Outstanding Schoolboy Sportsman in 1943 and again in 1944, and he excelled in track and field, baseball, basketball, and table tennis. In 1945, Castro entered the School of Law of the University of Havana, where organised violent gangs sought to advance a mixture of romantic goals, political aims, and personal careers. Castro's main activity at the university was politics. And in 1947, he joined an abortive attempt by Dominican exiles and Cubans to invade the Dominican Republic and overthrow General Rafael Trujillo. He then took part in urban riots that broke out in Bogota, Colombia in April of 1948. After his graduation in 1950, Castro began to practice law and became a member of the reformist Cuban People's Party. He became their candidate for a seat in the House of Representatives from a Havana district in the elections that were scheduled for June of 1952. But in March of that year, the former Cuban president, a man called General Fulgencio Batista, had overthrown the government and cancelled all elections. And as most of us now know, Castro became a Cuban revolutionary. Castro accused Batista of corruption and tyranny on multiple occasions, which is pretty damn ironic, and it's kind of what dictators do, though no one at the time knew that Castro wouldn't be much different. In fact, they saw him as a man of the people fighting on their side. And obviously they were completely fucking wrong, but that's by the by. Castro led his revolutionary movement to overthrow the dictator Batista, which became known as the 26th of July movement. The group had established a guerrilla base in the Sierra Maestra and were taking in other dissidents in order to build up enough forces to oppose the authoritarian state. After some time using guerrilla tactics, they finally defeated Batista's troops on the 31st of December 1958. After the revolution, Castro would go on to become the Prime Minister of Cuba from between 1959 and 1976, and then continue on as President from 1976 to 2008. Since, of course, in a dictatorship, no one exactly has a say on term limits, except the dictator. And would you believe that dictators usually get rid of term limits? Right at the start of Castro's administration, Cuba quickly became a one-party communist state, and all industry and business, including banks, oil refineries, and sugar and coffee plantations, were all nationalised, with state socialist reforms implemented throughout the entire country. This, of course, painted a huge target on Castro's back, because the American government were extremely concerned because the American government hated communists. Remember when the American government hated communists? Better times. Well, now there was a communist nation right on the American government's doorstep. So, this was a pretty huge cause for concern. Another reason that the American government was very concerned was because of Cuba's strong alliance with the USSR during a time when the Cold War was in full swing. Some people also believed that the US government felt that Cuba should be owned by the US, considering its proximity to the Florida coast, especially now that Cuba was a huge threat. Everyone wanted Castro's head, and if you think having the American government desperately after you was bad enough, Castro had also pissed off another group of people that you simply just did not fuck with. The Cosa Nostra, better known as the Mafia. Castro had derailed the mob's plans in Cuba, and high-profile organised crime figures such as Mayor Lansky and Santo Trafficante Jr. were hit the hardest, as they had made huge investments in Cuba to expand the Mafia's enterprise. And Castro had fucked all of that up. Lansky was actually on Batista's payroll as the dictator's casino gambling advisor, and he had also just spent millions of dollars on his masterpiece gambling resort called the Hotel Riviera. The mob had invested so much money in Havana that they had built a tourism destination that rivaled Las Vegas. However, casinos and luxury resorts are something that communist Castro viewed as the pinnacle of capitalist hedonism and opulence. And so, that made them something that had to be destroyed. The morning after Castro took office, his rebels and their supporters took to the streets of Havana and trashed a number of the resorts. Slot machines were smashed and burned in the streets, windows were shattered, and the biggest act of disrespect was saved for the Riviera. The rebels brought in a truckload of pigs and set them loose in the lobby of the hotel and the casino, tracking mud all over the place and relieving themselves all over Lansky's pride and joy. So yeah, the Mafia were extremely pissed off. So here we have two groups that would scare the shit out of anyone targeted by them. The US government and the Mafia. Technically both mobs, when you think about it. Now, the US government and the Mafia really did not get along, you may have heard. But both of them had an understanding of the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And this marks the beginning of these hilarious harebrained schemes. The US government teamed up with the Mafia to assassinate Fidel Castro. And these weren't just normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill mobsters. Two of them were on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. But the American government, of course, decided to give them a little bit of a pass for the time being so that both of the groups could focus on more pressing matters. The Castro regime had taken ownership of American properties in Cuba, and in response, the Eisenhower administration severed diplomatic relations with Cuba and allocated $13.1 million to the CIA in March of 1960 for use in their campaign against Castro. The CIA at this point was sort of in its toddler stage and was just learning the ropes of being a black ops intelligence agency. And when you are a beginner, you tend to make a few mistakes. The CIA now knows that hiding behind the curtain and being an invisible guiding hand is usually the best way to start any operation. But back then, they hadn't really learned that yet. So, right off the bat, they jumped immediately into the direct and out in the open approach. With the aid of Cuban counter-revolutionaries, the CIA proceeded to organize a full-on invasion of Cuba. Cuban exiles travelled to the US and formed the counter-revolutionary military unit Brigade 2506. The brigade fronted the armed wing of the Democratic Revolutionary Front, and its purpose was to overthrow Castro's government. The CIA funded the brigade, which also included some US military personnel, and the CIA trained the unit in secret in Guatemala. Now, why would Cuban people want to rise up against Fidel Castro? After all, I thought that communist dictatorships were supposed to be amazing places to live. Well, it turns out that life in Cuba had become absolutely horrendous. In Cuba, 1961 was supposed to be the year of education. However, it quickly became known as the year of the firing squad. Cuba's agrarian reform chief, a man named Antonio Núñez Jiménez, made a speech to a crowd of gun-toting militiamen where he said, "We will erect the most formidable execution wall in the history of humanity." Apparently, these executions were televised, and people would go and watch them live, with people even selling candy and drinks in the crowd, like they were at the fucking movie theatre. So yeah, it turns out that communism's fucking horrible. Yeah, I know, yeah, who fucking knew? And a lot of Cuban patriots wanted to rise up against this. So on the 17th of April 1961, over 1,400 paramilitaries divided into 5 infantry battalions and 1 paratrooper battalion, all trained and funded by the CIA with weapons supplied by the Mafia, all assembled and launched from Guatemala and Nicaragua by boat towards Cuba. 2 days before the invasion, 8 CIA-supplied B-26 bombers had attacked Cuban airfields and then returned to the US. On the night of the 17th of April, the main invasion force landed on the beach at Playa Girón in a place known as the Bay of Pigs, where the invasion force quickly overwhelmed the local revolutionary militia. Initially, José Ramón Fernández led the Cuban army counter-offensive, but later, when things were looking to be in their favour, Castro took personal control. As the invaders lost the strategic initiative, the international community found out about the invasion, and US President John F. Kennedy decided to withhold further air support since, invading another country with a proxy army looks pretty fucking bad. The entire plan, which was devised during Eisenhower's presidency, had required involvement of both air and naval forces, and the air support was crucial to the plan's success. So, with the air support withdrawn, the entire invasion plan fell apart, and the forces surrendered 3 days later, on the 20th of April, and most of the invading counter-revolutionary troops were publicly interrogated and put into Cuban prisons. As for what happened to them after that, well, the new execution wall was put to good use. The invasion was a complete failure, and the defeat of the American capitalist imperialists at the hand of Castro had solidified his role as a national hero in Cuba and widened the political division between the two formerly allied countries. It also pushed Cuba closer to the Soviet Union, setting the stage for the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The failure of the Bay of Pigs had embarrassed the American government, which made them hate Castro even more. The American government had to get rid of him by any means necessary. So now we get into the many times that the CIA tried to assassinate Fidel Castro. And when I say many, it was somewhere around 638 attempts. Yes, you heard that right. 638, spanning the course of 40 years. And some of the plans that the CIA came up with are either extremely sinister or they sound like they came straight out of a cartoon. Now, of course, we don't have time to go into all 638 attempts, but we can talk about some of the more major ones and, of course, the funny ones. Initially, the attempts weren't on Castro's life, but on his character. America's intelligence services tried methods to undermine the leader's public image as a charismatic speaker and powerful leader. So, in the 1960s, the CIA planned to sabotage Castro's speeches by spraying his broadcasting studio with LSD, in the hopes that he would start hallucinating and freak out while he was broadcasting live. Though this idea was dropped, because not only is it a fucking stupid idea, but it would have been very hard to contain the chemical, and not just Castro, but everyone in the immediate area would have been affected, so they would have all realised that something funny was going on. So the CIA had to continue to look for other options. So we can get into the method of assassination that most of you have no doubt heard of. Castro's cigars. Fidel loved his cigars, which you will see him smoking in pretty much every single picture of him. Cuban cigars are highly regarded all over the world, so there was no doubt a sense of pride for Fidel in smoking them. An early plot was to spike the dictator's cigars. At this point, the plan was only to spike them with something non-lethal, like adding a chemical that would cause hallucinations, most likely LSD, again hoping that he would smoke one before delivering one of his marathon speeches so that he would come across to his people as deranged and unhinged. Look, I'm really not sure why, but for some reason, during the 60s, the CIA was absolutely obsessed with LSD. The CIA also had a plan to assassinate his beard. In Cuba, like many other places, a beard was a cultural sign of masculinity. And Fidel's beard was also iconic to his image, though Earlier in his life, it was basically just a neckbeard. But despite that, the CIA wanted Fidel's hair to fall out, giving him the appearance of a young boy, which is not a very good look for a powerful dictator. They tried to achieve this by dusting Castro's shoes with thallium salts, which would have made his prized facial hair fall out. But, like many other attempts on Castro, this one failed because Castro cancelled the overseas trip that he was going to make to the location where the CIA had set up the operation. Castro always seemed to be multiple steps ahead of the game. The US government was desperate to be rid of Castro by this point, and they decided that instead of attempts to kill his image, they would instead just kill him. An earlier attempt to deal with Castro involved hiring the Mafia to poison his food. According to CIA documents named the Family Jewels papers that were declassified in 2007, the US government had involved infamous American mobsters Johnny Roselli, Salvatore Giancana, and Santo Trafficante to make Castro sleep with the fishes. In September of 1960, Salvatore Giancana, who was a successor of Al Capone in the Chicago outfit, and Miami syndicate leader Santo Trafficante were indirectly contacted by the CIA about the possibility of Castro's assassination. Johnny Roselli, a member of the Las Vegas syndicate, was used by the CIA to gain access to these other mafia bosses. The go-between from the CIA was a man named Robert Mayhew, who introduced himself as a representative of several international businesses in Cuba that were expropriated by Castro. The Mafia, as we already know, had plenty of reasons to accept. On September the 14th, Mayhew met with Roselli in a New York City hotel and offered him $150,000, which is close to $1.4 million in today's money, to assassinate Fidel Castro. Present at the meeting was James O'Connell, who identified himself as Mayhew's associate, but he was actually the chief of the CIA's Operational Support Division. The declassified documents didn't reveal if Roselli, Giancana, or Trafficante had accepted a down payment for the job. But according to the CIA files, it was Giancana who suggested using poison pills as a means to spike Castro's food and drink. The pills were then manufactured by the CIA's Technical Services Division, and they were given to Giancana's nominee, a man named Juan Orta. Giancana recommended Orta to be an official in the Cuban government, which would give him easy access to Fidel Castro. Allegedly, after several unsuccessful attempts to introduce the poison into Castro's food, Orta quickly got cold feet and demanded to be released from the mission, which was then handed over to another unnamed participant. The second attempt was mounted through Giancana and Trafficante using a man named Dr. Anthony Verona, the leader of the Cuban exile junta, who had, according to Trafficante, become disaffected with the apparent ineffectual progress of the junta. Verona requested $10,000 in expenses and $1,000 worth of communications equipment. However, it is unknown how far the second attempt went, as the assassination attempt was cancelled for unknown reasons. Castro had some kind of supernatural luck because this would be one of the many times that the assassination attempts against him would fail. People either got cold feet, the CIA would abandon their convoluted, ridiculous plans, or Castro was just 10 steps ahead. Another plot by the CIA was to spike Castro's cigars with something much more lethal. Something that was called botulinum toxin, which was strong enough that it would kill anyone simply putting one of the cigars anywhere near their lips. The cigars were delivered to an unidentified person, but it is unclear what happened to them after that. Did the assassin get cold feet? Was the plot uncovered? We just simply don't know. But we know that the cigars never reached Fidel Castro. Because, well, he was still alive. And one of the most well-known attempts made on Castro's life was when the CIA had apparently replaced one of his cigars with an explosive replica, hoping that Castro would light it up and it would explode in his face, killing him. Now, although many of you have probably heard of this one, and a lot of you probably believe it, the exploding cigar was most likely just a myth, based on other cigar-related attempts. Though, it really isn't too far-fetched when you think about all the other crazy shit that the CIA tried to pull. So, maybe the exploding cigar was an idea that was considered, but it looks like it was never actually attempted. However, it still turned into a bit of an urban legend. Castro seemed to be aware that the CIA was trying to pull some shit with his cigars. So Castro eventually created his own brand of cigars called Cohiba, which he established in 1966 as a limited production private brand which supplied exclusively to Fidel Castro and other high-level officials in the Communist Party of Cuba. So, because the cigar manufacturing process and the cigars themselves were now under heavy lockdown, tampering with Castro's cigars became very difficult and, frankly, not worth the time or money to the CIA. So they had to look for other options. And that is when they discovered Castro's love of the sea. The CIA had devised yet another elaborate plan as intelligence officials found out that Castro loved scuba diving. Now, scuba diving, of course, is very dangerous, even if you know what you're doing. And with scuba diving, accidents happen all the time. So, this would be a perfect opportunity to kill Castro, but also not arouse too much suspicion. So, what genius plan did the CIA come up with? Were they going to mess with the oxygen levels in a supply tank? Were they going to attract sharks to the area in the hopes that they attacked him? Maybe they were going to have some Navy SEALs lying in wait under the ocean just to physically drown him while he was underwater and no one could see. No, those plans would have actually made sense. No, what the CIA wanted to do instead was make a big seashell and paint it a bunch of pretty colours, hoping that Castro would notice it while he was diving and go, "Oh, I've never seen a shell like that before," where he would then swim down to it and try to pick it up, where that would then detonate the explosives that would have been hidden under it. A booby-trapped seashell, a fucking booby-trapped seashell. The CIA actually wanted to go ahead with this, but the idea was shot down by the higher-ups for being impractical. And then what the CIA should have done is immediately fire the arsehole that came up with that idea. The CIA, however, were still going to try to kill Castro at sea, but this time with a much more sensible plan, which was to poison his scuba suit and breathing apparatus with a fungus that would cause a debilitating respiratory illness which most likely would kill him, though if it didn't, it would still put him out of commission for a very long time. The poisoned suit and breathing gear was meant to be given to Castro by an American lawyer named James Donovan, who had been involved in hostage negotiations with Castro, and the two had developed a relationship. And There are two versions of what happened next. One version says that Donovan wimped out at the last second and gave Castro a different suit to the infected one. And the other version, told by Richard Helms, who later became CIA director, said that the suit never even left the CIA laboratory, because the whole plan was, in his words, cockeyed. The CIA had to scale down their plans from these Looney Tunes schemes and decided to try to kill Castro using a hypodermic needle concealed inside a ballpoint pen. Something a lot more fitting to a secret agent intelligence agency instead of LARPing as Wile E. Coyote. The needle would be so fine that Castro wouldn't even notice the insertion. A later report said that the needle was to be rigged with poison and injected into Castro by a high-ranking Cuban official who was in secret talks with the CIA. However, the Cuban official thought that the device was shit, and he complained to the CIA, saying that surely they could come up with something a little bit more sophisticated. This assassination attempt also suffered very bad timing, because the official was given the pen on November the 22nd, 1963, which was the date of John F. Kennedy's assassination. So the CIA were very busy that day. What were they busy with? Well, who knows? Maybe that'll get declassified one day. In March of 1961, CIA officer Richard Bissell had managed to smuggle a vial of poison to a restaurant employee in the Havana Hilton, with the idea being that he would pour it into Castro's milkshake the next time the dictator stopped by, which he did regularly for milkshakes, since Castro had this really weird major obsession with milk and other dairy products. Like, that Castro's obsession with milk and dairy could get its own video. Just that in its own. Like, Castro even wanted to create a new breed of dog-sized mini cow so that every household in Cuba could have milk whenever they wanted it. But let's not get sidetracked here. Castro, however, didn't show at the hotel for a few months, but it seemed that he caught wind of the plot as the Cuban security police showed up and found the poison vial frozen to the cooling coils of the restaurant freezer. In keeping with being a dictator, Castro had eyes and ears everywhere, and that's one of the reasons he was able to stay one step ahead of the US government every time. So, the CIA had to go back to the drawing board and decided to go for a different approach. They were going to find people that Castro was emotionally close to in his past. The CIA recruited one of Castro's former lovers, a woman named Marita Lorenz. She had been given poison pills to put in Castro's drink while they were having a dinner date. But she only managed to get as far as smuggling the pills into Castro's bedroom inside a jar of face cream, which was not a very smart idea because the pills had dissolved into the cream. And she couldn't exactly force-feed Castro the face cream, so she made the smart move and decided to abandon the assassination attempt. According to Lorenz, Castro somehow knew about her plan, so he confronted her about it. And when he did, he offered her his gun and said, "Here you go, kill me then." And obviously, she did not take the gun and shoot him because she was terrified. Castro then apparently said, "You can't kill me, nobody can kill me." And he smiled while chewing on his cigar. She said that she felt completely deflated because Castro was so confident and knew that she wouldn't kill him. And then they had sex. What? Like, most couples usually have angry sex after one almost kills the other. Of course, many of the other attempts on Castro's life are still under redaction and have not yet been released to the public. The last known attempt was in the year 2000, when a plan was hatched to put 90 tons of explosives under a podium where he was due to speak in Panama. 90 tons of explosives for just one man. Though, due to Castro's many eyes and ears, the plot was foiled by his security team, which managed to pull him out of the area quickly before anything could happen. But there was one thing that did manage to get close to Castro and deal some damage. And it wasn't the CIA, it wasn't rebels, it wasn't militants, and it wasn't a jilted lover. It was a step. And after all the time, effort, and money put into killing Fidel Castro, on the night of the 25th of November 2016, at the age of 90, Fidel Castro passed away. The exact cause of death was not disclosed though, and some believe it may have been an assassination attempt that was finally successful and the Cuban government just said natural causes so that no one would get demoralised and the Cuban government wouldn't look weak for letting its leader be assassinated. But the most likely explanation is when a man is 90 years old and is still drinking 10 milkshakes and smoking 20 cigars a day, I think it's safe to say that the death might be self-inflicted. Fidel's brother, President Raul Castro, confirmed the news of Fidel's death in a brief speech. His death came 9 months after his older brother, Ramon, died at the age of 91 in February. Fidel Castro was cremated on the 26th of November 2016, and his funeral procession travelled 560 miles along the island's central highway from Havana to Santiago de Cuba. And after 9 days of public mourning, his ashes were entombed in the Santa Ifigenia Cemetery in Santiago de Cuba. Now, Fidel Castro was a fucking horrible tyrant. He was an awful, awful person. But you can imagine how stressful it must be when every single day you have to look around every corner, check every bite of food, every sip of drink, and also not being able to trust those closest to you in case they had turned CIA informant. That can have a severe mental effect on a person, which Castro, in my opinion, absolutely deserved. But when the person suffering from that is a dictator with a lot of power, that kind of thing can lead to very bad things for the country's people. So personally, I think what the CIA did made life a lot harder for the Cuban people. Because shit flows downhill. But what is just truly funny is the CIA, who, let's be honest, are a terrorist organisation, but the CIA spent tens, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars on over 600 attempts to kill a man through a bunch of harebrained, wacky cartoon schemes, only to have every single one of them fail and for their target to instead die naturally at the ripe old age of 90. Now that's comedy. Hey, it's just us now. It's just you and me. It's just you and me. Right now, I know that the videos for this month, I've only uploaded 3 videos this month and they've all been kind of major, you know, nothing too massive, but the reason for that is I'm taking time off this month for the holidays so that I can be with my family. So December has been a pretty minor month for videos and the start of January will be the same, and that's just because I want to take some time off so that I can be with my family over the holidays, you know. Plus you just had a big banger month with November where we had videos that were like an hour long, an hour and a half long. We had Christopher Lee, we had the Red Baron, we had huge massive ones like that, and that is the plan for next year. But December and the start of January, I'm taking it easy so that I have a lot more free time so that I can be with my family over the holidays. And I've had a very big and busy year. I mean, I ran in an election this year where I beat the communists. Like, I don't even care about winning the election. I beat the communists. That is all I need. I've opened up a whole arse studio where I've got staff, I've got writers, I've got editors, I've got premises where I film, you know. That was an absolute nightmare to set up. However, it did help me be able to create 5 videos a month, plus also 2 videos every day, almost every day, on the second channel, which I would appreciate it if you would go over and subscribe to that as well. And also the biggest event that happened for me this year is I had a baby. I became a dad. I became Daddy Dankula, which I can now be called without any of those weird sexual undertones. So I've started a company, opened a studio, I've had a busy year. I've had a very, very, very busy year. But despite that, I've still managed to bang out at least 5 videos every month, right? But you know, December and January, I'll be taking a little bit of a chill, a little bit of time to myself, a little bit of time to reflect on next year, because next year is going to be banging. Next year is going to be a big year, big things, big videos, big balls. You know, picture the month of November, right? Picture that, but for an entire year. And it won't just be Mad Lads as well. You know, it might be, videos like banned books and Freetown Christiania. If I find something I find interesting, I just might make a big fucking hour-long video on it, telling you the story, because I enjoy that. But the Mad Lads as well, although there will be, 2022 will be the year of the Mad Lad. Maybe we'll talk about some people that drank some Kool-Aid. Maybe we will talk about a couple of gangsters that are the spitting image of each other. Maybe we'll talk about a certain crazy author. Maybe we'll talk about some Roman emperors. Who the fuck knows? The sky's the limit. I can do whatever the fuck I want. And history has given me a bountiful supply of Mad Lads to the point where I don't think I am ever going to run out. And all of this, you know, the whole studio and everything that I'm doing, it was only possible because of you, because of all of you subscribing and liking and subscribing to the Patreon and shouting out my channel. And I want to thank every single one of you for hanging around and watching all my videos, because you're the people that make this channel, because Lord knows the algorithm's not fucking helping me. So any growth that I've ever had is all au naturel, and it's all because of you guys. So thank you very much for joining me on this journey, and hopefully you will all still be joining me into next year, where, who knows, maybe we'll hit a million next year. I wanted to hit 900,000 this year, but you know, algorithm. However, next year, the sky is the limit. So for all of you that have hung around and you're liking and subscribing and commenting on my videos and sharing them with your friends and getting more people to subscribe to me, thank you very much. Right, now let's not make it gay, right? But thank you very, very much. And I want to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Now give me a kiss.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody should subscribe.